What is up, guys? Steven here, and I'm going to be bringing you my thoughts today. There's been a lot of discussion in our Skype call about Baton Pass. And in our Skype call, I'm really, I'm not going to say I'm the best, but I'm easily the most experienced, at least this generation, in OU. So, people have kind of come to me, asking about, my thoughts on Baton Pass and Baton Pass chains. And I remember back in late last year when they first brought up the idea of nerfing Baton Pass, and this is my post in the forum about Baton Pass then, and I kind of like to go through it to help explain my thoughts about why I think Baton Pass is extremely broken, and it was really broken when you could use a full team of 6 baton passers. I'd also like to explain why I think it's still broken after the nerf to only having 3 per team. So let's get into this post. Whatever introduction. The first question that this forum asked is Baton Pass with specific reference to full Baton Pass teams a problem for the development of the metagame? So basically my thought on this, I'm gonna try to read through this and kind of explain why I said what I said. So, as you can see, I said, I don't think Baton Pass teams would be a problem for the metagame if they're not as popular with top ladder players as they are. The reason I say ladder players is because Baton Pass is actually really frowned upon in major tournaments like SPL and World Cup of Pokemon, and for good reason, because it's highly matchup dependent, but we'll get into that later. So, however, since there are several players who have laddered and laughed their way to the top of the OU ladder, being mostly Dennis and players like Stinky Shark, who are really nice people, and I like talking to them, but I really, I don't think that their play style should be legal in the OU metagame right now. And because they're having so much success with these teams, this is back last year when you could use full 6 team. It was becoming a more and more popular play style. Especially once Dennis posted his entire Baton Pass team. You could see his Baton Pass team anywhere from bottom of ladder to the very top of ladder. So, any play style gets adapted to. Last generation, Rain Hyper Offense was very good, and people adapted to it by using things like Sun Offense with trapping Heatran, or Jirachi to sponge the special hits, stuff like that. And for example, last generation Gastrodon got catapulted to OU because Rain offense was so good, but it really worked in that metagame, and Rain wasn't overpowered. You had other playstyles you could use. And, in the case of Baton Pass teams this generation, stall teams run, Haze Quagsire to kind of stop the opponent from getting boosts, but I've seen a lot of replays, and that doesn't really prevent the opponent from winning with Baton Pass. All it does is delay it, especially with stall teams. Espeon has Magic Bounce, which is one of the best abilities that any Pokemon could get for Baton Pass, because you bounce taunts, you bounce hazards, you bounce phasing moves. So you're really stuck in there. And even if they're carrying something like Mold Breaker, Roar, Mega Gyarados, you just have Ingrain, so it doesn't really matter. So Stall runs Haze Quagsire, which is basically useless. If you're using a Stall team and you face BP, you might as well hit that X. You're not going to win, you're going to lose, and it's really unfortunate. And the best way for hyper-offensive teams to beat Baton Pass is basically with Bird Spam. By that, I mean using either Mega Pinsir or Talonflame. The reason that this works is because they both get flying priority, and they're both very strong Pokemon. And the speed setter for Baton Pass is Scolipede. It's always Scolipede. There are backup setters like Agility, Zapdos. Again, I'm talking about when this is, you could have all 6 Pokemon. But the main speed setter was Scolipede, so you could beat it with flying, but if they did have that Zapdos, then it didn't really matter. They were going to get their speed anyway. So, my main issue with Baton Pass is that you need very specific answers to beat a somewhat obscure playstyle. I don't really have anything against obscure playstyles. Like, I really like running Trick Room teams. I really like running Manual Rain teams. But the thing about those is you can actually play around them. You can play around Trick Room. You can stall Trick Room turns. Yes, they're faster for those 5 turns, pretty much guaranteed, but the opponent still has to predict. You can switch around and waste turns, and the opponent still has to predict. But with Baton Pass, you don't have to predict at all. Once you get the speed boost, you're faster than the opponent, so it doesn't really matter. And once again, I'll get into that later. So, a well-played Baton Pass team will beat every balanced team there is. And I really like playing balance and balance offense. So when I see Baton Pass, I know I've already lost. It's really unfortunate. So once again, I'm still talking about teams that had 6 Pokemon with Baton Pass in this post. So the next question they asked was, if so, what elements in particular do you think are pushing Baton Pass over the edge? So I basically go in to say that, as Pokemon has evolved and there's 6 generations now and 700 some Pokemon, it's impossible to build a team that beats every playstyle or idea. There are so many Pokemon to choose from that it's you can't win against every team. So the best you can do is just, put the best team that you can, put out there and win. But what's weird about Baton Pass is that it used to seem like just kind of a gimmicky option like Trick Room. Last generation, you didn't really see Baton Pass that often because it wasn't as viable as it is right now. So, the thing about Baton Pass this generation is it had everything it needed to be successful. Scolipede is basically guaranteed at least 1 speed boost with the combination of Mental Herb and Protect, and really you're basically guaranteed at least +2 defense, because, if you're in against something that you're slower than, you press Protect and you become faster, and then you can substitute, and you get your speed boost regardless. And if you think they're going to taunt, you just get up your Iron defense, and then you're faster, and you Baton Pass out into your Espeon, and that just messes up their whole plan. So Espeon is the main problem, I think, in Baton Pass, because it really allows Baton Pass to, one, just poop on stall. It bounces everything back that makes stall effective. And Espeon isn't really that great of a Pokemon in OU, but it is a good Pokemon when it has +3 speed, +2 defense, and, 2 Calm Minds under its belt, with stored power. So it really, it's able to handle phasing and hazards that would otherwise ruin Baton Pass. And, you say another way that Baton Pass can lose is Perish Song, but Mr. Mime gets soundproof. So, once again talking about when you could have a team of all 6, Vaporeon was really good as it was a great defensive passer. It dealt with problems like Mega Pinsir and Talonflame. Sylveon is a great Pokemon again because it beat the dark types that, hurt Baton Pass. And, basically it was just another bulky pivot, and it was kind of a safety net for Espeon. And finally, you could have another, the last slot was kind of up to whatever the person wanted to use. Smeargle is the most common, but you could also use Mega Scizor, Zapdos if you wanted speed, Mawile for more defense and attack. You have options. So, there's no, they can basically determine what they want to try to beat, and it's impossible to predict against Baton Pass. There's really not any use in attempting to predict. I think that using Baton Pass has little to no skill. If you're in a bad matchup, assuming you have the speed boost, which, like we talked about earlier, is basically impossible to prevent unless you're running Mega Pinsir or Talonflame, then they just press Baton Pass. And if the opponent switches, then you just go into best case scenario. If they stay in, you still get to go into best case scenario and continue the chain. So, you can argue that that's basically what Volt Switch and U-Turn are. But Volt Switch has the negative, the negative that there are ground types that can block it. And in addition, you're not always faster when you're using Volt Switch and U-Turn. That's why, Scarfers with U-Turn are really good because you outpace them and force them to either switch or stay in, and then you get switch initiative no matter what. But you at least have to predict in those situations, and it's not always so clean cut because I guess the best example I can think of is Landorus T in against a Heatran that is not on a balloon, and the opponent knows you're scarfed, right? So you can U-turn, but if they predict that, then the Pokemon that's coming in is going to get hit with a Lava Plume. Or, sometimes they can just run Protect and then scout what you're going to do. So that makes it, much easier to predict. But in Baton Pass, you're always faster, and there's really no way that you can predict Baton Pass. I mean, you can predict what they're going to try to Baton Pass out into if you're still in, but normally they have boosts already, so it doesn't really matter, and they're just going to go into best case scenario anyway. And especially as someone that likes to play balance, it's very difficult to beat these teams because you could beat these teams if you run, Haze Greninja or, stuff like that. Or, like Felicify says, you can run Choice Scarf Malamar with Infiltrator and Topsy Turvy. See, the thing about those is that, yes, they counter Baton Pass, but are they viable against the rest of the metagame? Absolutely not. And that's kind of what is frustrating to me is if you want to beat Baton Pass, you have to run a team that is not necessarily as good as it should be against other playstyles. I remember I did an RMT at the end of last year, or maybe it was the beginning of this year, where I used Doom Desire Jirachi because it basically countered Dennis's Baton Pass team. The thing was that against any other team other than Baton Pass, Jirachi was basically dead weight. So if I got into a game against Dennis, I'm like, alright, I'm really glad I have this Jirachi, it can help me win. But in any other situation, it's just a waste of a Pokemon, or in the case of Haze Greninja, a waste of a move slot, So I think what really pushed Baton Pass over the edge when you could have an entire team of 6 Pokemon with Baton Pass was that it had everything it needed. And Dennis's Baton Pass team was basically perfect. There's a reason that everyone on the ladder used that Baton Pass team. It didn't need to be changed. It was perfect. And I think that kind of makes the metagame boring. Imagine if there was a hyper offensive team or a stall team that was so perfect that everyone ran it. So you had like 3 teams on the ladder, and those are the only 3 teams that people ran. For one for each play style. So there's one Baton Pass team, there's one hyper offense team, there's one balance team. I think just the fact that was the team, that's it, that's the best option, that just kind of shows how absolutely broken this just shows how broken Baton Pass was. Alright, so the next question that they asked was, do you believe that banning individual Pokemon, such as Espeon / Scolipede, would make Baton Pass manageable? To be completely honest, I don't think that banning an individual Pokemon is really the right way to deal with Baton Pass. As I said earlier in the post, standard Baton Pass, being Dennis's team, is easily the best way to utilize the playstyle. That's why everyone used it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Mr. Mime was a broken Pokemon in OU. Just because it worked really, 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 really well on that specific team, it didn't mean that it was a broken Mon. In fact, it's pretty terrible. And it just, if it came down to choosing which Pokemon do you want to ban from, being able to be used in Baton Pass, uh, that wouldn't have made sense because every Pokemon in the Baton Pass chain was just important as the rest. Um, some were better, but that doesn't mean that they were less important, if that makes any sense. The Pokemon that weren't as good, like Sylveon, is certainly not as good as Espeon because it doesn't have Magic Bounce. That doesn't mean that it wasn't very important, if that makes sense. But uh, would banning Espeon from OU make the playstyle more manageable? It probably would, but um, there's been a lot of negativity about banning Pokemon right now, and that Smogon is ban happy, and you guys can't keep banning Mons just because you don't know how to deal with them, and blah 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 blah. I honestly think that there had to be a better way. Banning banning Espeon does not make sense because it's not very used in OU and it's not very good in OU. So, yeah. Next, it asks, would you support a blanket ban on the move Baton Pass? And as you can see there, basically, my thoughts are no. The reason I don't think we should just ban Baton Pass is that it does have other uses outside of full Baton Pass teams. The thing about those other uses is that they're a bit easier to deal with, and you can at least play around them. A good example is I actually got into a battle, well, we came as Romans. We were just laddering together, and he got into a battle against Stinky Shark, who was using a new team that had it was hyper offense and it had Gorobus on it. Now, basically, when you see a Gorobus in OU, you know what it's going to try to do. It's going to try to Shell Smash, and it's going to try to Baton Pass it to a teammate that can try to sweep through your team. I don't think that that's really unhealthy, because that's something that you can try to prevent. You gotta play around, much in the same way that when you see the opponent has what's a good setup mon? You see that they have a Charizard X. You're not gonna switch in your Rotom on a double down because you don't want them to get a free switch into Zardex and get up a Dragon Dance. So like you can play around setup sweepers in the same way that you can play around Smash Passers. Another example is a good one from last generation is Celebi. Celebi would run a little bit of speed and Baton Pass so that it could not get Pursuit Trapped by Tyranitar unless it was Scarfed. And I think this is another really healthy way to utilize Baton Pass. It's even used in OU this generation on Mega Metacham. There's a set that I believe is Substitute, Baton Pass, and Dual Stab. It doesn't really, Metacham doesn't hit that many Pokemon with its stabs, but a good example of that is, Aegislash is a good switch into Metacham. So you substitute as they switch it in, and you can freely Baton Pass into, say, a Pursuit Bisharp, which is a good partner with Metacham. So that kind of allows you a free switch, and it gives you an advantage, kind of like U-Turn would. So I feel like, that's another healthy way to use Baton Pass, and it's just better than these whole teams. And finally, it asks, would you support the introduction of complex bans like Pokemon X plus Pokemon Y on the same team? Feel free to suggest more forms of complex bans. So, as people said before in this post, people I think really thought about this like I did. The best way to fix the problem was a complex ban, and my thought was that you should limit the number of Pokemon with Baton Pass to 2. And like I said, the main problem with Baton Pass is the whole chain. Not a single Pokemon in the chain. If I could say any Pokemon in the chain, it would be Scolipede. Scolipede is such a good speed passer. It's gross. It can set up speed while it's setting up defense, which is just really annoying. But the whole chain was really the problem. And they all had a purpose. And I think doing a complex ban on a particular setup of Pokemon is dangerous. And like you can't have Scolipede and Espeon on the same team. I think that's kind of dangerous because, like I said here, the example is, hey, we need to ban DoD plus Bisharp plus Balloon Aegislash on the same team. Just because it's a good playstyle doesn't mean that it's bad. And like I said at the bottom, this is the most important thing to me. Scolipede plus Espeon on the same team are scary in of itself. It would not ruin Baton Pass as a strategy, but it would force those players to be more creative in team building with a limit of 2. So you would obviously use Scolipede and Espeon because they're best 2 passers, but you would at least be able to play around it because there's not a lot of things that you can't keep the chain going with 2 Pokemon. You can't just go back and forth forever. And if you had a Dark type on your team, that would force Espeon to run another attacking move other than Stored Power, or it would force Scolipede to run an attacking move over maybe Protect or even Substitute, or just forego Iron Defense. But that's part of what makes it so good. So I feel like that would make Baton Pass. You would have to be much more creative. So after all of my thoughts of full Pokemon of 6 Baton Pass teams, Smogon came out and they did choose a complex ban. They chose to limit the number of Baton Passers to 3. So what does Dennis do? He goes and makes a Baton Pass team with 3 Pokemon with Baton Pass. So, let's go to this video. This is Richard's video, the Canadian Wi-Fi. Please go check this video out. He also talks a little bit about his thoughts on Baton Pass. But this is Dennis's new team. He has Baton Pass Smeargle, Baton Pass Scolipede, Baton Pass Espeon, and then he has Vaporeon basically to deal with Talonflame and Pinsir like it did. Unaware Clefable with Stored Power plus Moonblast to receive the boosts from these 3. And Taunt, Stealth Rock, Dual Screens, Light Clay, Deoxys Speed. So, this team, I think this team pretty much proves that the ban didn't solve the problem. I feel like the point of the ban, or the complex ban, whatever you want to call it, should have been to prevent people from running teams dedicated to Baton Pass. I just think it's a broken strategy in general. And these 3 members, right here, Espeon, Scolipede, Smeargle, having had several conversations with Dennis, he said that basically those are the 3 most important members, and these are his reasons as to why, not mine. Scolipede is easily the best speed setter that has ever been introduced for Baton Pass. It used to just be Ninjask or Agility Zapdos. And yeah, they were kind of good, but the thing about Scolipede is it sets up defense and speed. So that basically just gives you free leeway to go into Espeon. You're free to go into Espeon because you have the defense boost and you can start setting Calm Minds. And you can block whatever crap the opponent wants to do. Finally, Smeargle, it doesn't matter if you only have 3 and you don't want to risk your Espeon to a prediction on Aurora or something, because you can just run Spore, Ingrain, Quiver Dance, Baton Pass on Smeargle. So basically, once you're in, and you can just Baton Pass with those 3 around, and then look at the opponent's team and be like, hey, does this get beat by Clefable, or does it get beat by Vaporeon? And at that point, you decide what you want to win with, and you go into that Mon, and you win. So, I'm going to read my thoughts from this video. I know this is a very long video, but I just wanted to get this out there and just kind of see what y'all wanted to think. So, I said here, my main problem with BP is that the player does not ever have to make any real predictions. Once you get the speed boost Scolipede, which can basically only be prevented for a short time with Mega Pinsir or Talonflame, they can click Substitute or BP and never have to make any plays. If they BP, then since they're faster, if you stay in, they just go to best case scenario. If you switch, they get all the momentum. I know you can make the argument this is no different than U-turn and Volt Switch, but you're not always faster with those moves. Basically, Baton Pass is very centralizing. If you're running Hyper Offense and you're not running Talonflame or Mega Pinsir, you're going to lose to Baton Pass. I don't want to be forced to run Mega Pinsir or Talonflame. I don't want to be forced to run those Mons. I don't want to be forced to run Malamar to beat this playstyle. That'd be like saying, to beat Hyper Offense, you have to use Skarm Bliss or you're never going to win. And I know that's not true, but it's just an example. You have to use Skarm Bliss. Well, I'd really rather not be forced to run two Pokemon to beat a playstyle, a team, that is everywhere on the ladder, just because, that's what you have to do. I have 700 some Pokemon to choose from. I want to be able to choose the Mons that I want to use. And I honestly found this kind of funny. Done Deal suggested that the way you beat Baton Pass is, you set up with it. So you set up SDs with Mega Pinsir, or you set up, Calm Minds with it. It's absolute garbage. That's a terrible strategy, and you're not going to win if you do that. Once again, having spoken with Dennis, the one who made the team and who has been at the top of the ladder with the team, and Done Deal is not near the top of the ladder, so he does not face players who use Baton Pass effectively. Basically, what Dennis has told to me is that if you set up with me, that's great, because I'm accumulating boosts while you're not damaging me, and then whenever I want, I can put you to sleep, or I can roar you out. And I keep my boosts, but you don't keep yours, and that's GG. So basically setting up with them is stupid. So I just thought that was kind of funny. And then I'd also like to say, there's a reason that Baton Pass is frowned upon in tournaments like SPL. It's highly team preview dependent. You can't beat it with certain teams that are still very viable in the metagame. You just can't beat it. And I know that you could say, well, you have to take Baton Pass into account when you're team building. Well, I don't want to make my team 75% worse to beat one team. One team, not a playstyle. I understand, changing your team, like, I might want to run Mixed Thunders so I have a better chance of beating Stall that has Blissey. That's, trying to beat a playstyle. But no, you're trying to beat a team. And, that's annoying. And it's not, like I said, it's not something you can play around like Trick Room. And all it takes is one turn, and you've lost against Baton Pass. You can make the mistake of actually killing a Pokemon, and that loses it. Say you kill, say on this battle, right here, I have my Bisharp, and he has Clefable. And he's an Espeon, right? So I know he's going to Baton Pass. And for some unknown reason, he goes into Clefable as I Iron Head. I crit him and I kill him. What does that do for me? That does nothing. That lets the opponent win. He goes into Scolipede and gets up an Iron Defense, and he wins at that point. You can't beat the chain if they get a free boost. A single free boost. It takes one turn for you to lose. Even if it's a good turn for you, you can lose. So I think Baton Pass is just extremely broken right now. And I feel like 3 Pokemon was not enough. Like I said, back here, a team with Scolipede plus Espeon, plus a boost, plus a Pokemon to receive the boosts. I remember earlier in the generation, people were running Scolipede, Espeon, Mega Kangaskhan. I know Mega Kangaskhan is banned now, but that was a very scary playstyle to face. And it wasn't a full Baton Pass team. It was just a strategy for winning. Kind of like in my last video, I had an NU team that had SD Combuskin. It's very good because it sets up on certain Pokemon, but it's not broken as a playstyle. So, yeah guys, just let me know what your thoughts are on this, and Yeah, I've had enough talking about this. Peace.